Alright folks, we need to talk. I was supposed to be starting my work on the Ultimate Beginner's Guide for Avowed today, but I can't do that, because every time I sit down and think about Avowed, rather than being able to focus on the mechanics and features of a game, my mind gets dragged away by the absolutely mental comments I keep seeing online. There are so many people talking about tiny little details of a game, and using that as an argument to say that the game as a whole is bad. And I'm certainly not the only one to have noticed this trend. Nebula here left a comment on the latest episode of the Pipcast, which is a podcast I record with my buddy Katogenesis, and the comment reads as following. I saw someone saying Avowed was worse than Skyrim because there's all these ponds, lakes and rivers, but there's no fish. How do these people have the energy to get mad about crap like this that has zero impact on the actual game? This is the sort of thing I'm talking about, and Nebula's comment also shows that I'm not the only one seeing this type of stuff online. Now, I do want to get on the record early and say you're allowed to complain about the things you don't like in certain games, even when it is small stuff. Nobody is out here claiming you can't say that. The point I'm making is that these sort of nitpicky complaints become weirder the more they appear. Take a look at this comment which a subscriber of mine left on my last Avowed video. He was replying to me, letting me know some of the things that he felt were missing from the game that Skyrim had managed to include. Now at a base level, I don't have any major issues with this comment. Well, technically I do have one. They've used the term world building at the end, when I think that immersion or even realism is a better fit for the point they're trying to convey, but that's my biggest issue here. All they're really doing is expressing why they haven't been able to fully connect with the world, and how it doesn't manage that same sort of lived-in vibe that he felt with Skyrim. These are all very minor complaints, but I get it. There is something truly magical about being able to just exist inside of the video game world and watch time pass by, see people go about their day-to-day lives and do all the humdrum stuff. I'm a big fan of that sort of stuff, and I love the little details that can be added to a world through these elements. I truly think there is a conversation to be had about small little elements like these, and how they can really make the world come alive. But I also don't think gamers at large are ready to have that conversation. Because that comment from Moon was undoubtedly the best of them. I feel pretty neutral towards that comment we just looked at, but it is hands down the best version of this sort of discussion point I've seen making the rounds, which is not a good thing. Every other comment I've seen touching on this stuff is just flat out negative in every sense of a word. Where Moon's comment reads as him being a little upset or maybe disappointed that the game didn't have these features he wanted, everyone else seems to be flat out angry. I did have the perfect comment to showcase this, which was left on one of my videos, but unfortunately it has vanished. What I do have though is the email that YouTube auto sent me of the guy's reply to my reply to his original comment. He'd originally talked about how Avowed looked and made reference to the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, so I made a joke about having mods installed out the wazoo to make Oblivion look like Avowed, and this was his reply to that. I tried to go kind of light-hearted into the discussion, but he was already on full anger mode. And this is something I keep on seeing. People aren't having the conversation of, oh, wouldn't it be nice if Avowed had a few more elements to make the world feel real? Instead it all seems to be, why the hell isn't there a fish in this pond? Avowed is a pile of crap made by idiots who don't even know what fish are. I know that it's the internet, and being a bit of a brat is always going to get more attention than just having a calm conversation, so it's not like I'm entirely surprised by people online just being kind of shitty. That's sadly par for the course. The surprise is that it all seems to be centred around the same sorts of things. Where I was expecting this behaviour was on the pronoun selection during the character creator. Sure, it's a single box and has pretty much the same level of impact as getting to choose your character's name or hairstyle, but that hasn't stopped people from acting like it completely changes a game before. And while that certainly has still happened this time around, I think that some of the people who wanted to make those complaints have realised that most of us don't really think twice about such a minor part of a game. So instead of focusing on that minor element and claiming it makes the entire game bad, they instead have switched to picking apart a bunch of other minor elements, and trying to use them as justification for why everyone should hate the game and have a miserable time. And I know how things work out. These people didn't have the idea organically. What will have happened is some large creator who has amassed a following by being kind of shitty online and claiming that gaming is dying because of whatever hot button topic is trending at the time, has said all these things first. They'll have said that Avowed must be a terrible game because no fish, and as we know, game only good if fish. They'll have made this point originally to try and justify their own distaste towards the game, and then it just gets parroted by their followers. And then in turn, everyone else sees it, and it just spreads further and further and further outwards just constantly. I'm like 99% sure that's what's going on here. In most cases, I'm sure it's not actually people trying to come up with real or valid criticism, but instead just parroting their spokesperson for some interesting points. And that's also why Moon, I think, is one of the only people actually trying to put their own opinion on it. And it's sad I'm not seeing more of that. Anyway, that's my best guess for the cause of all these similar comments popping up. What I want to do now is take a look at the validity of these individual complaints, because I don't think all of the stuff that I'm seeing get complained about is true. Unfortunately, we had the perfect comment to go over and fact check. Remember at the start of the video I showed Nebula's comment? Well, they got a reply, and it is making a whole bunch of claims about Avowed, so let's go over each one. First up, no fish. This was one which seemed fairly simple to me, and I was well prepared to talk about it and explain why this could be the case. As someone who lives by the sea, I was going to point out that it's really not that weird a thing to not be seeing fish when you're standing at the coastline or in the shallows. Plus, I've been to plenty of lakes or streams where there just aren't fish around. Would it be nice to see some fish swimming around? Sure, but it's certainly not unheard of for fish not to be hanging about in the same places we're travelling. But I don't need to make these points. You know why? Because Avowed has fish. I wanted to double check this was true, so I booted up the game and went to the closest body of water. There weren't any fish at the very edges, but as soon as I got underwater and started swimming, there they were. Fish! A whole bunch of them, swimming around in this lake and having a merry old time. But you know what, this is a later area of the game, so maybe this is unfair of me. Perhaps the people leaving these comments haven't made it this far, so I should check out the very first region in the Living Lands. Looks like there's fish here too. The water isn't even all that deep, yet the fish have still managed to find their way here. I even went and checked by the port that you first get transported to. Now in all fairness, there doesn't seem to be any fish when you swim out to sea, which is a shame. But there are fish directly next to where you arrive after having finished the tutorial. There's a school of fish right here. I had seen so many people saying that there weren't fish in the game that I just assumed it was correct. But they're all wrong. There are tons of fish. Avowed has fish. They just flat out exist and we're all being lied to and I don't know why. At first I assumed this must be true because the comments always focused on fish rather than passive wildlife in general. Obviously there's bears and stuff as enemies, we fight them regularly early on, but I could understand things feeling a little lifeless if we didn't have a decent amount of fauna around the place. But as we can all see by the majestic beauty on screen right now, there are passive animals for the player to come across during your travels. I figured the comments were focusing on fish because they wanted to try and make this point, but it can't hold up in the radiant splendour of this triumphant creature. But now I'm left feeling even more confused by it all. Not only are they wrong about the whole fish thing, but they might have missed the one way they could have tried to make this point. Birds. I'm not certain Avowed has birds. You definitely hear birdsong while walking around, but I don't remember ever seeing a bird while playing. I kept my eyes to the sky soon after recording that gorgeous mammal from before, and didn't spot any. Keep your eyes on the footage from here on out and let me know if you do see a bird anywhere, as I'm not sure if the comments just picked the wrong species of animal to go after, or if I'm just being a little bird blind. First part of that comment proved to be incredibly inaccurate. Let's move on to the second part, no actual guards. There's a guard, here's another guard. These two guards are guarding the gate into town. On a pure factual point, this one's pretty easy to disprove. I suppose none of these technically have guard in their name, but that's because there's not one set of guards in the game. It all depends on what faction is in control of what region. You get a couple of named third-born soldiers outside their city, can find rangers serving as guards within the Emerald Stair, and Paradise is guarded by the idea of military, which is a huge plot point within the game and one of the core themes the story is based around. The guards may not be called guards, but that's certainly what they do. If I'm being generous and trying to read into this in the one way that could be a somewhat valid complaint, I suppose the point being argued is that you as the player don't get arrested. Avowed doesn't have a stealing mechanic, and you can only deal damage to enemies, which is a bit of a shame considering Obsidian also made the Outer Worlds, where you could do a kill everything run. What this leads to is a world where you can't get arrested as you're just wandering about. But there is some justification to this. You play as the Imperial Envoy. You basically have diplomatic immunity. Hell, one of my favourite little interactions is in Paradise. A couple of guards are looking at the scene of a murder, and the weapons are still on the ground of the crime scene. You can head over and pick them up, and the guards will complain about you messing with the crime scene, but also point out that you're the envoy, so there's not really anything they can do about it. Alright, on to the next point. no arrow physics. Once again, I jumped in game and had a little play around with the bow. For the most part, the bow and arrow does seem fairly simple in terms of the physics it relies upon. You aim it, draw, loose, and then the arrow sticks in where you want it to go. There is some drop-off at long range, but it really is just a basic bow and arrow system for the most part. What I figured the no arrow physics comment was referring to is how arrows just kind of stick into the sand, mud and rocks all the same. Just kind of impacts as standard, stays there for a few seconds, and then vanishes. A little simplistic, sure, but no biggie. I got ready to stop recording when this happened. So turns out, the arrows do bounce. I swear to God, this was one point I fully went into expecting to agree with them. It's another one that is so simple, so basic, so who cares, but I figured it must be the case. But yet again, it's not. Turns out there are arrow physics. The bows in this game are just strong enough to pierce through rocks, so you aren't constantly pinging arrows around the place. If you want to watch some arrow physics though, just find a fast travel beacon and shoot it a bunch. It's a surprisingly fun thing to do. Next point, no water physics. We're back on the physics train again, and it's going to be a similar case here as with the arrow one. The water physics are pretty basic for the most part, and really don't look all that interesting. The big problem with the water interaction is if you play in third person. With the third person camera, things do look a little off. The water not moving when you swim through doesn't feel quite right, so I can understand why people have brought this up. But if you play in first person, then the water's fine. You get these little waves as your arms push through the water, bubbles that come up from the player as they swim underwater, which does look pretty cool, and last of all, ripples. Sometimes. So the ripples one is weird. In general, the game doesn't have a ripple effect for when you shoot the water or jump in, but I did find that when I was in this little fishy stream earlier, I had ripples forming when I wandered around, and so too did my followers. Overall, the water effects are definitely underwhelming, and I think if you play exclusively in third person, then this is likely to stand out to you somewhat. The game did only come out properly last week, so who knows, maybe there'll be a patch in the future which adds in some extra water effects. That'd be nice. Alright, penultimate point this comment makes is saying lame story and sides. I assume they're talking about side quests here, and this is all subjective, so I don't have to do any testing for this one. If you don't enjoy the main quests or the side quests, then you don't enjoy them. That's just the way it is. I will say that I personally am enjoying most of the quests so far. Every once in a while I will end up with a quest I don't really care for, but enough of the NPCs are interesting to chat to, and there are some themes that certain quests focus around which interest me, and so I'm enjoying myself. Once again, completely subjective, so there is no right or wrong here. And now the final complaint this comment made: characters on Oblivion level of ugly. What I'm going to do now is show you some footage of an Oblivion character and a character from Avowed, but I'm not going to tell you which one is which. Instead, I want to see if you can tell the difference. Could you spot the difference? I even spent a few minutes looking for a pretty basic NPC who had a clear clipping problem with their chainmail, and even with me doing that, they are leagues apart. Oblivion is famous for the potato-faced NPCs. Even at the time they weren't considered good looking, so I don't know why that is the game everyone is trying to compare it to. Not all of Avowed's NPCs look particularly good. Kai looks great, from the scale detail to the little texture effects on his clothing, absolutely stunning. But in general, I don't think Avowed is a game with amazingly standout visual NPCs. I certainly don't think it's bad, but I think the common NPCs just look decent overall, rather than great. And to make things worse for Avowed, I think it actually struggles a lot with the upload process. The game looks notably better when I'm playing it than it does after I've recorded, edited and rendered, and then uploaded the video file. The game seems to dip in quality more than most when all this is undergone, and yet it still looks better than the fourth Elder Scrolls title. I'm sure that you could find other games to try and make this comparison work, so why does Oblivion keep getting brought up as the comparison point? I can see the thread for why things keep getting brought back to Elder Scrolls. Not only is Avowed a first/third person fantasy RPG, much like the modern Elder Scrolls titles that Bethesda have made, but Obsidian also made Fallout New Vegas, which does give them strong ties to Bethesda, and often leads to people online comparing the two studios. Plenty of Elder Scrolls fans feel a little starved right now, so are looking to Avowed to tide them over. But the fact the comparison is being drawn between Oblivion just as much as Skyrim truly baffles me. Look, Avowed is not a perfect game. It has flaws just like every game that has ever and will ever be made. Nobody is demanding that you pick up the game and enjoy it. Different games are for different people. Even as someone who is really enjoying their time with Avowed so far, I can tell that it's the sort of game I probably won't still be playing a year from now. I'll make a handful of builds, enjoy a few different playthroughs, and then move on to something else. And that is fine. I can enjoy it for what it is, and accept that it's not the next Skyrim. Rather than comparing it to the RPGs that I've spent the most time in or have had the most fun with, I'm just playing it for what it is and having a blast doing so. The complaints for this game I keep seeing online not only seem to be incredibly minor, but weirdly wrong too. If you take nothing else from this video, at least take the knowledge that people online will just say whatever, without checking that it has any factual credibility. If you really do care about something, make sure you get your facts straight first, that way you can figure out why your opinion is the way it is, and start developing your own talking points from there. Anyway, this has been a big distraction from the video I was supposed to be working on. Hope you all enjoyed my fact checking at least. If you want to see more Avowed content from me, I have just started a challenge run on the second channel, which should be uploaded by the time this video is out. Feel free to subscribe to both channels for more content in the future, leave a like, and, as always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.